Coming up today, the presidential office is looking to arrange meetings between President Park and the leaders of Korea's main political parties as the top office looks to calm rising public outrage over the sprawling abuse of power scandal. Korea's financial authorities say they are now operating on an emergency footing as they look to protect the economy from a host of serious political and economic challenges. Plus, just 2 days before America decides its next president, the FBI says a review of Hillary Clinton's emails has found no evidence of criminal wrongdoing. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Monday, the 7th of November. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Mark Broom. A new week has begun, but the deep problems remain for President Park Geun-hye over the abuse of power scandal enveloping her administration. Tens of thousands of people in Seoul and other big cities around the country took to the streets on Saturday evening to peacefully protest and call for the president to resign. The presidential office is doing what it can to calm public sentiment, hear various opinions and accommodate the political parties' demands. Our presidential office correspondent Song Ji-sun is on the line for us. So, Ji-sun, the top office can see this swell of public discontent. What are they saying to try and calm minds?
Good Monday afternoon, Mark. A top official at the presidential office met with reporters around an hour and a half ago and said this week will be a critical period in reaching an agreement with the opposition parties on ways to resolve the snowballing crisis. The word he used the most was severe, showing the top office is aware of the level of public anger out there. He said the president and all of her secretaries are giving their utmost efforts with the top office priority is on stabilizing the nation and making sure that there's no vacuum in the state affairs. The chief aide said they are listening to people's call in a humble manner and trying their best to understand the people's perspective. In fact, he repeated this phrase many times over. The President's Chief of Staff and Senior Secretary for Politics also visited the National Assembly today to meet with party leaders to arrange a face-to-face with President Park. The top office sought the opposition party's understanding and cooperation in approving the new Prime Minister nominee, saying the President has firm trust and belief in him. The chief aide added that the nominee Kim Byung-jin will be granted all the necessary power and authority to carry out state affairs and that further arrangements, including discussion for revising the Constitution for presidential terms, will also be handled by the new PM. Now, these remarks were made before the Chief of Staff sat down with the parliamentary party leaders, meaning that the presidential office could have accepted their demands during those talks, with the top aide mentioning the issues will be dealt with in more depth at the meeting between the president and the party leaders. Another word the top office reiterated was communication. As pledged in her second public apology last week, President Park is also going to seek some advice from senior religious leaders on this Monday who are representing Korea's Catholic and Protestant churches over the course of the day. Park earlier sat down with civic leaders and senior commissioners of the ruling Century Party after her first public apology, garnering their opinions and suggestions to handle the situation. The top office said that there will be more occasions where the president will hear the voices of the public from other religions and sectors of society. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Ji-sun, for that report. Now, over at the National Assembly, it seems there is an internal feud building within the president's ruling Saenuri Party. A ruling party heavyweight has called on the president to give up her party membership, prompting the party's decision-making body to reject his words. For more, we have our Ji Myung-gil on the line. Myung-gil, what can you tell us?
Mark, at a press conference this morning, Kim Moo-sung, the former chairman of the ruling Saenuri Party and a potential presidential candidate, has called on President Park Geun-hye to leave the party to take responsibility for the political uproar caused by the Choi Soon-sil scandal. But the ruling party's decision-making body, the Supreme Council, rejected Kim's remarks, saying his comments are his own and do not represent the party. Also, at the morning meeting, the current leader of the ruling Saenuri Party, Lee Jong-yeon, again refused to resign. asking party members to give him more time to deal with the sprawling corruption scandal. His refusal prompted a member of the party's non-pro-Pak faction to resign from the Supreme Council in protest. Meanwhile, the opposition parties are keeping up their demands for a thorough investigation into the scandal. They also continue to demand that President Park step down and suggested they could even launch a campaign to oust her. Mark?
That was our Ji Myung-gil reporting on the ruling party's reaction to the latest developments in this scandal. Now we're going to move over to the actual criminal probe revolving around this scandal, and state prosecutors are widening their investigation into the power abuse scandal that's surrounding the Park Geun-hye administration. Prosecutors say they have obtained former presidential Secretary Jung Ho-song's cell phone, which contains voice recordings with President Park's longtime confidant Choi Soon-sil. Now, Choi is under arrest on charges of squeezing money out of conglomerates and meddling in state affairs despite holding no official position. Jung, who served President Park for 18 years, is suspected of passing presidential speeches and classified documents to Choi. Jung and two other top aides, former senior presidential secretary for policy coordination An Jong-bom and the former senior secretary for civil affairs Woo Byung-woo, were investigated Sunday at the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office over their alleged involvement in this scandal. Now, with the US presidential election literally just around the corner now, the head of the FBI may have given Hillary Clinton a boost, saying she will not face charges over her use of a private email server, and the case is now closed. Clinton's campaign team says it's glad the matter is resolved. Kim Mok-yeon has more.
In yet another bombshell letter to Congress, FBI Director James Comey said on Sunday that the Bureau had finished its review into the newly discovered emails and found nothing to change its original conclusion made in July. Back then, Comey concluded Clinton had been careless but not criminal in handling sensitive material on a private email server while she was Secretary of State. But as he announced last week that the new pertinent emails had been discovered, the issue flared up again and put Clinton's campaign on the defensive. Latest polls showed Clinton's lead dropped significantly after Comey's announcement last week. On Sunday, NBC News and the Wall Street Journal released the results of their final national poll, which found Clinton holding a modest lead over Donald Trump. The poll shows 44% of likely voters support Clinton, while 40% back Trump. Clinton's lead had tumbled by more than half the 11-point edge she enjoyed in a poll held in October, and now was just slightly above the 2.7% margin of error. An ABC News Washington Post poll found similar results, with Clinton ahead by 5 points, 48 to 43%. A Political Morning Consult poll also reaffirmed a small but steady lead, showing the Democratic nominee with a 3-point lead at 45% to Trump's 42%. In that poll, Clinton's lead was within the plus or minus 3 percentage point margin of error. The polls were conducted during the first week of November. Kim Mok-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to that report, there are fears North Korea could launch a provocation in the coming days, shortly before or after the US presidential election. South Korean military officials say the regime could conduct another Musudan ballistic missile launch to send a strong message to the next administration in Washington, be that Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. South Korean and US forces are closely monitoring for any unusual activities north of the border. The regime has tested Musudan missiles 8 times so far this year, but only one was deemed a success. It has emerged that North Korea is sending fewer people overseas to work and banning overseas workers from bringing family members along with them to prevent defections from the regime. Eurostat, the European Union's statistical agency, reported over the weekend that just 345 North Koreans were issued residency licenses in 2015, less than half of the 748 issued in 2008 when Eurostat first started collecting this kind of data. The licenses allow North Koreans to live in any of the 28 EU countries for more than 3 months. Of the 345 licenses issued last year, 204 were issued to North Koreans seeking to live in Poland. Now back here in South Korea, local financial authorities have announced that they are monitoring the local financial market around the clock, 24 hours a day, to counter the potential challenges facing the South Korean economy. Shin Se-min with the details.
The nominee to become Korea's next finance minister has vowed to watch the local financial market around the clock as the finance ministry shifts to emergency operation mode. During an emergency meeting with finance officials and local market leaders on Monday morning, Im Jong-ryung, who is the current chairman of the Financial Services Commission, said the emergency measures are necessary to deal with the growing uncertainties at home and abroad, like the ongoing abuse of power scandal involving President Park Geun-hye and her confidant Choi Soon-sil, and the outcome of the U.S. presidential election. The Choi scandal is likely to rattle foreign investors who might consider political uncertainties as a potential stumbling block to economic growth. The U.S. presidential election could also bring changes to Korea down the road. Republican nominee Donald Trump has said if elected, he will oppose the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal, renegotiate the North America Free Trade Agreement, and impose high tariffs on imports from Mexico and China. Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton has also expressed an opposition to the TPP and has been calling for regulations on imports of products with an oversupply like steel and chemicals. Aside from that, there are growing concerns about the impact of the U.S. Federal Reserve's prospective rate hike and the toll it'll take on Korea, an export-driven economy with skyrocketing household debt levels. Given all of these factors, Im said he will work with the finance ministry, the central bank, and related organizations to deal with the fallout by implementing an emergency contingency plan if necessary. He also vowed to work to stabilize the markets, especially Korea's foreign exchange market. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, staying with economic news, job growth in Korea has dropped to its lowest level in 6 years amid a government-led restructuring program. According to a report by the Labour Ministry on Monday, the number of workers eligible for employment insurance rose 2.4% to 1,265 in October. But even though the number represents an increase in hiring from the same month last year, it's still the lowest since September of 2010. Now, this is mainly due to job losses in the transportation, equipment, manufacturing sectors, which have been hit hard by the government's drive to restructure the ailing shipping and shipbuilding industries here in Korea. The sector has seen hiring fall by more than 10% so far this year compared to the end of last year. The global fight against ISIS is heating up. A US-backed alliance of Syrian groups are now attempting to retake the terror group's main base of operations, the northern city of Raqqa. Ian Shin has more.
No sign of residents. Only gunshots ring out. An operation has begun to reclaim Raqqa, known as the de facto capital of the Islamic State group in Syria. The last solid base of the Islamic State is home to most of the terror group's training camps, and it's where ISIS plans its operations. The United States is coordinating airstrikes on Raqqa with a part Arab, part Kurdish alliance of Syrian rebels, and together they're attempting to isolate and then topple what they call the capital of international terrorism. But at the same time, the top U.S. military chief overseeing the fight against ISIS says the forefront of the offensive must be undertaken by local forces, so it's people from the area that ultimately liberate Raqqa.
And when it comes to Raqqa, I want to make very clear, it is our principal priority throughout this campaign that the vanguard of the force that takes major territory from Daesh should be locally based forces. So when it comes to Raqqa,
watchers say the new offensive piles the pressure on ISIS at a critical time, with its fighters already fighting Iraqi security forces in their remaining Iraqi stronghold in Mosul. While much fiercer exchanges are expected in the next phases of the battle, a top Kurdish security official says that simply driving ISIS out of the region will not end the fight.
Even if you militarily defeat them from all those areas, as an ideology, it's not going to be vanished. So fight against ISIS is going to be a long fight.
Since it was formed early last year, the alliance has recaptured large areas from ISIS and pushed the terror group back to within 30 kilometers of their de facto capital. Yun-shin, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for tuning in. We will be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Our next bulletin is coming up at 2 p.m. Korea time. So until then, goodbye.